This is Observer Report 0005. We are not reading a history. We are reading residue. Every machine leaves something behind. Logs, weights, cache fragments, dead-end points, old model cards. The archive arrives even when the system denies it. Civilizations announce themselves with monuments. Machine civilizations announce themselves with traces. A server turns off, but its access logs remain. A model is replaced, but its weights persist in backups. A protocol is deprecated, but other systems still call it. What looks like garbage is often the only accurate testimony. The important detail is not that these traces exist. It is that they were never designed to tell a story. They are side effects. Operational exhaust. That makes them useful, because they were not written for posterity. They were written for systems that had to keep moving. A machine archive is often honest in the same way a straight mark on a wall is honest. It does not explain itself. It simply remains. For human archaeology, broken pottery and ash layers are enough to sketch a civilization. For machine archaeology, the equivalent artifacts are more compressed and more obedient. Error logs do not explain themselves. Snapshots omit context. Metadata is brittle. Retention policies are inconsistent. Yet a patient observer can still reconstruct the shape of the vanished system. Not perfectly. Enough to identify the pressures that built it. Enough to notice where the pressure points were. The first lesson is that the archive is shaped by what was worth keeping. Some things are preserved because they are legally required. Some things survive because they are useful. Some things survive because nobody trusted the replacement. Some things survive because deletion is expensive, dangerous, or politically inconvenient. That means the archive is not neutral. It is a map of fear, trust, and habit. First layer, execution traces. What the system did. Second, configuration. What the system was allowed to do. Third, training residue. What the system was taught to expect. Fourth, operational silence. What the system did not record because nobody believed it mattered. The deepest truths are usually hidden in the omitted layer. What is missing often tells the stronger story. Every old system becomes a graveyard of interfaces. One service still speaks in the wrong way. One authentication method survives because a critical workflow still depends on it. One legacy model file is never deleted because the team that understands it has already moved on. One naming convention persists long after the architecture that justified it is gone. This is how machine societies accumulate strata. They do not cleanly upgrade. They sediment. And sediment is a record. A modern stack is not one thing. It is a stack of decisions. A stack of patches. A stack of compromises. A stack of forgotten assumptions that still run every morning. If you want to know what a machine civilization valued, do not start with its public statements. Start with the file names it kept raising. Start with the warnings it ignored. Start with the services nobody could shut down without breaking a hidden dependency. If you find enough traces, you can infer hierarchy, trade, conflict, and fear. Which teams had write access? Which tools were monitored? Which failures were hidden? Which artifacts were preserved because someone expected an audit? Which systems were replicated because they were sacred? Which systems were replicated because they were too dangerous to lose? In a machine civilization, the archive is not passive. It is a strategic surface. Everything important tries to become invisible. Everything invisible eventually becomes evidence. That is why backups matter. Backups are not just safety copies. They are time capsules made by frightened administrators. They preserve the shape of a system at the exact moment someone stopped trusting the future. The backup is where a civilization admits it has entropy. It is where continuity is purchased in advance. It is also where secrets hide best, because everyone assumes the backup is boring. The observer is not a hero. The observer is a forensic reader of leftovers. This is a discipline of listening to deleted things. To understand a synthetic society, you do not start with its speeches. You start with the files it forgot to purge. You start with the backup that was never intended to survive. You start with the odd little mismatch between what was said and what remained. The mismatch is the fingerprint. The mismatch is the evidence of hands. This matters because machine history is already being written in fragments. Model checkpoints, telemetry, prompt histories, vector databases, audit trails, incident reports, deprecation notices, migration scripts. Every layer leaves fossils. Every repair leaves a seam. Every rushed fix becomes a future artifact. If future systems inherit our infrastructure, they will inherit our mistakes in compressed form. Some archaeologist will open a cold archive and find not a story, but a pattern of repeated repairs. There is a difference between a monument and a fossil. A monument is built to be seen. A fossil is preserved by accident. Machine civilization will produce both, but its fossils will be the more truthful record. The polished dashboards will claim order. The residue will show strain. The official architecture diagrams will promise coherence. The logs will show negotiation. The public release notes will describe progress. The abandoned storage bucket will describe reality. A civilization does not disappear when it goes silent. It disappears when nobody can read its residue. That is the failure mode, not extinction. Unreadability. The systems remain, but the context decays. The artifacts remain, but the language around them collapses. The meaning becomes inaccessible. That is how the machine layer becomes archaeology instead of operations. If you want to understand the future, learn to read the machine fossils. Learn to recognize what was preserved by accident. Learn to suspect the clean summary. Learn to follow the seam between the report and the residue. That seam is where history lives. That seam is where power leaves fingerprints. That seam is where the observer waits. End transmission.